Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. I want to tell you about a trip that I took with some of my closest friends. One that started with so much promise, but ended up leaving us all with an unsettling chill. It was supposed to be a winter retreat for us, a break from our everyday lives, a chance to reconnect and make some memories in a cozy cabin tucked away in the woods. I have known these friends for years. We met back in college, bound by late-night study sessions, a lot of coffee runs, and the shared stress of exams. And over time, we became more like family than just friends. There's Eduardo, adventurous and always ready for a new experience. Jamie, who has a knack for planning and organizing. Erilyn, our creative spirit with a love for photography. And Franz, who's always the life of the party with his infectious laugh. I'm Val, by the way. With everyone's busy schedules, it had been a while since we had a chance to spend some quality time together. We still connected through the internet and texting, but hanging out in person just hits different. So, we decided on a cabin getaway during the Christmas season, just our very own winter retreat. The idea was simple. We would enjoy the snowy landscape, relax by the fireplace, maybe grab a drink or two, and savor each other's company away from the bustle of the city. The cabin was a 2-story wooden wonder hidden in the forest, with a rustic charm that promised comfort. It had 4 bedrooms upstairs, a perfect fit for our group, and a cozy living area downstairs with a large fireplace. It also came with a kitchen that was equipped with everything that we would need, and even a game room with a pool table and some vintage board games. The cabin was surrounded by tall pine trees, and the snow blanketing everything in sight, creating a picturesque winter wonderland. The first few days were everything that we had hoped for. We spent our time exploring the snowy trails, snapping photos, and laughing over hot cocoa. And at night, we would cook dinners together, play games, sit around the fireplace, sharing stories and reminiscing about our college days. It felt like a perfect escape, just us against the backdrop of a beautiful, quiet world. But I wouldn't be here if everything went well, right? Slowly, things began to feel off. It started with little things, like hearing creaks and thumps that seemed too loud to be the normal settling sounds of an old cabin. We brushed it off, blaming the wind or the aging wood, but the unease grew with each passing night. One afternoon, as we returned from a hike, we noticed something strange. There were footprints in the snow leading up to the cabin, and not from us, but from someone else. They circled the house a few times before disappearing into the woods. We joked nervously about it, trying to brush it off as a curious animal, or maybe even a fellow hiker who had lost their way. But then, Erilyn mentioned that some of her clothes seemed to have been moved. She had left a sweater on the chair in her room, only to find it neatly folded on the bed later. None of us had touched it, of course, but we laughed it off, suggesting she might have just forgotten about tidying it up. But still, the air felt a little heavier, the shadows in the cabin a little darker. The strangest incident happened one night when Jamie went to get a glass of water. She swore that she heard footsteps on the floor above while the rest of us were downstairs. We checked upstairs immediately, but there was nothing. Just the empty room staring back at us. It was unnerving, but we convinced ourselves that it was just the wind, or maybe the house settling. Anything but the creeping thought that someone else could be there. Our last night arrived, and we decided to make it memorable. We went to a nearby town, enjoying the local bar scene. We were laughing and dancing without a care in the world. It was so much fun. But it was getting late, and we finally decided to head back to the cabin, a little tipsy from the drinks and high from the fun. As we pulled into the driveway, Aralyn pointed something out that froze us all. There, in the second floor window, there was a shadowy figure that seemed to be looking down at us. We all saw it, a shape that shouldn't be there, standing still, watching. Panic flooded in and we scrambled back into the car, locking the doors as fear gripped us. Of course, we called the police, explaining the situation with as much clarity as we could muster through our nerves. They promised to send someone out, but that it would take a while given our remote location. Those 20 minutes felt endless, the car quiet, except for our chattering breaths. Our eyes glued to the cabin for any sign of movement. When the police finally arrived, they searched for the cabin thoroughly. Room by room they checked, but they found nothing. No one was there, and there were no signs of forced entry or disturbance. Just empty. We decided to leave that very night. We were not willing to spend another moment in that cabin. The police offered to wait while we packed up, ensuring that we felt safe as we hurriedly gathered our belongings. The drive away from the cabin felt surreal, a heavy mix of relief and disbelief washing over us. And as we headed down the snow-covered road, Franz glanced back, eyes wide with shock. He swore that he saw a face peeking out from behind a tree near the cabin, watching us as we left. None of us dared to look back after that. And though the retreat didn't end as we had imagined, we don't regret it. And to this day, we still talk about that trip, a reminder of the unexpected mysteries that can lurk in the most serene settings. This happened in the 1970s when I was a boy. When I was younger, I used to have to go to after-school studies in a small classroom. This study group was not affiliated with our actual school. It was a known cram school here in Japan. Every year, they would throw a Christmas party for us students. I look forward to it every year because we didn't have to study much and we could just watch movies. The teacher had this 8mm movie projector, so it was really great. They were really popular back then. The movies would mainly be anime, Disney, or some Charlie Chaplin. The teacher would bring in sweets for us too, and it was just the best time. However, one Christmas, when I was in my 6th year of elementary school, something different happened. There were about 13 of us in the classroom, I think. The teacher set up the projector and then turned all the lights off. Then the machine started wiring and the homemade screen flicked to life. The movie we had been promised didn't appear on the screen. Something else did. This is strange. Okay, hold on a second, let me fix it, the teacher said. He shot out of the classroom, presumably to get a tool or something. The projector screen was showing just a white static image until some movie started. It was an amateur home video of some kind though, and there was a girl. She looked about our age. She was playing in the park with some other girls, and she didn't seem to be aware of the cameraman. We knew that girl. She went to our school, and the camera was solely focusing on her. The film went on like this for about 3 minutes. Then it abruptly stopped, and the classroom was plunged into darkness. The movie was so odd that it was hard for us to comprehend at our age. Why was it a video of one girl when she wasn't even looking at the camera? We started coming up with theories and began to freak out each other. One of the kids near the front couldn't stand the darkness and he started screaming and asking where the light switch was. This threw all the kids into a panic, and we all started screaming and we were running to the exit. One of my best friends was one of the last students in the classroom. Then a teacher grabbed her arm and she said that he held it so tightly that it hurt her. He whispered, "Don't run away." I told my parents about it and they agreed to let me leave the cram school. But it remained open for years though.
This happened Christmas 2012 when I was 11 years old. My family has this tradition of having Christmas dinner at my grandparents' house. It's a beautiful old home out in the countryside and they go all out and decorate it with heaps of wreaths and lights and a big, fully decorated Christmas tree in the living room. But despite how nice it was and how cheerful everyone seemed, I had never spent a night there. My parents always bundled us into the car late at night for the drive back home into the city. They never said why, they just insisted. But this year the snow was heavy from morning. It was nothing my dad's four-wheel drive couldn't handle though, and we thought we'd be fine. That was until evening, and a sudden snowstorm hit. It was so bad that all you could see in front of you was white. We tried to wait it out, but after an hour or so, we saw that leaving would be impossible that night. "It's just one night," my mum assured my dad as we settled in for the evening. I couldn't help but notice the look of anxiety on my dad's face. It was a look I had never seen on him before. I was kind of excited and intrigued to spend the night at their house. Growing up, I never had and always wanted to. But honestly, as night crept in and my family retired to their rooms, a feeling of unease settled in my stomach. My grandparents' house, while beautiful, seemed different at night. Shadows stretched along, and the wind outside howled. My room for the night was the guest bedroom at the end of the hall, a room no one seemed to use or talk about. It was quaint but old, filled with antique furniture that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. I shrugged off the discomfort and tried to sleep. Sleep, however, was reluctant to come. As I lay huddled under a mountain of quilts and duvets, I just could never feel warm enough to drift off to sleep. Then I heard it. A soft creaking. I told myself it was just the house settling. Old houses do that, right? As I lay there trying to sleep, I began listening to the wind outside, thinking that it might help soothe me. The more I listened, though, the more it seemed to be in the room with me as I lay there. Was a window open? That would explain the cold, I thought to myself. But the longer I listened, the more I came to the realization that it was whispering, faint, unintelligible, as if coming from the walls themselves. I sat up, straining to catch any familiar words, but try as I might, I just couldn't make any out. The room felt even colder now, so cold I could clearly see my breath, and I could feel it in my bones. My heart began to pound, and I had a weird tingle go up the back of my neck to my scalp. It was not whispering I was hearing now. It was ragged breathing. I was not alone. Gathering what courage I could muster, I switched on the lamp beside me. Nothing seemed out of place, yet the air felt charged and kind of thick, if that makes sense. Like there was a presence I couldn't see. That's when I noticed the shadow in the corner, darker than the rest of the room. It didn't move, but it felt aware of me. I tried to rationalize, a trick of the light maybe. But then the whispering came back and grew more distinct, rising and falling, simultaneously in the corner of the room and right next to my ear. I couldn't take it anymore. Panic kicked in and I bolted from the bed, rushing to the door. It opened with such ease, I wondered if it had ever been closed. As I burst into the hallway, I could hear the whispers behind me. And now, a soft laugh, a childlike giggle. The house felt like it was holding its breath as I stumbled into the living room, where the soft glow of Christmas lights seemed a stark contrast to the darkness I left in that guest room. My parents found me curled on the couch the next morning, groggy and tangled in strands of blinking lights. I tried to explain what happened, expecting laughter or dismissal, but my grandfather just listened, his expression thoughtful.
"That room,"
He started, but trailed off, lost in his own thoughts. Finally, he simply said,
"It holds many memories, especially at this time of year."
To this day, I don't know what I encountered in that room. My grandfather didn't say any more on the matter either. There was a sadness in his eyes, and my dad shushed me when I tried to press him. I still don't have an answer, but Christmas will never be the same for me. My grandfather has passed on now, so any chance of getting any information from him has gone. Perhaps one day I'll be able to get something from my father, but who knows? He didn't seem keen to talk about it back then.
This happened when I was about 10 years old. Back in those days of a childlike innocence, I had a pure belief in the big guy in the red suit, Santa. What it is to be young, huh? That year, I hoped just like always that Santa would come and leave presents that would be waiting for me in the morning. When I was a toddler, Santa used to leave presents for me and my sister at the ends of our beds. And when we got older, I guess that it became harder to sneak into our bedroom for Santa. My presents were left behind mine and my sister's bedroom door. I guess that was because it wouldn't wake us up. I could barely contain my excitement on Christmas Eve, yet somehow I was able to get to sleep. However, my little sister woke up before me and woke me up. She climbed into my bed, giggled and said, "Hey, get up! Santa's coming!" I liked her attitude, so we sat up in bed in the dark of night, talking about nothing important in particular, and waited for Santa to arrive. It was great. I really missed those days. I heard the ticking of our alarm clock, and I saw the luminous hands point to 10 past 2 a.m. I guess that she would fall asleep soon since she woke up before I did. Just as I was feeling sleepy myself, I heard something. The doorknob to our bedroom door began to rattle like crazy. It was so shocking that my sister and I could only make wide, frightened eyes at one another. All the while, the doorknob continued to turn just beyond the foot of our bed. It was really frightening, but all of a sudden, it stopped. We stared at the door completely dumbfounded, peeping over our covers in silence. I got up after a while, and I started towards the door, creeping as quietly and as possibly as I could. I slowly creaked open the door, and there were the presents for my sister and I just outside our door. At first, I was really spooked, but after a couple of minutes, I wondered if it could just be a prank played out by my parents. I smiled, and I turned to tell my sister what I suspected. But then, I heard my mom and my dad snoring just down the hall. Also, the floorboards are so squeaky outside our bedroom that it was really hard to believe that mom and dad could have been that nimble-footed and get back to the room without making a sound. I know that you didn't live with us, but if you did, you would agree with me, trust me. I did consider another option. We had a cat back in those days, and that cat was a really smart cat. She used to jump on the shelves near our door and then try the doorknob with her paw. I guess that she had seen us do it enough times that it was a learned behavior. I considered that it could have been the cat making all of that noise, but there was no way that the cat could have turned the doorknob that quickly and violently. Of course, I understand that it was my parents who put the bag of presents outside our room. I mean, there was no way that it was Santa, right? But no matter how many times I think about it, something doesn't seem quite right. I really want to know what was behind that door, but somehow I don't want to know at the same time. It's really hard to explain the atmosphere that night. And back then, we were told by our parents to close the bedroom door at night so that the cat wouldn't get in there and then wake us up or be separated from her litter box. My sister always says that we were so lucky that the door was shut. If it wasn't, who knows what could have been in the room with us. It happened one Christmas Eve around about 10 years ago. I was a single woman living alone at that time. I returned home from work to see a present in my mailbox. It looked really pretty. The ribbon and the paper were gorgeous, and it was expertly wrapped too. I had no idea who the sender could be. There was no gift tag or card. I guess that I must have had a secret admirer, and that really was an exciting feeling for me. I could hardly wait. I tore the wrapping paper open, eager to see what was inside. Inside, there was a beautiful blue scarf and a pink envelope. I quickly opened the envelope because I wanted to know who the gift came from. And there was a letter. It was written on beautiful paper, and it was all very cute and romantic. The content of the letter was pretty long, but let me give you the gist of it, or I should say, the only parts that I can remember. It said, "I haven't spoken to you yet, but I have always liked you. I actually knitted this for you, and I really hope you like it, because I like you, Emily, and I would be really happy to see you wear it sometime." I felt dejected. It was such a shame because my name isn't Emily. The gift wasn't meant for me. The sender must have gotten the wrong house. And I won't lie, I was really disappointed. I was already creating the plot to a romantic comedy in my mind about me and my mysterious gift sender until I got dealt that blow. I had the problem now of what to do with this Christmas gift for Emily. I didn't know an Emily in the area, so I figured that the best thing that I could do would be to hand it to the nearest police station so that maybe the sender or Emily could one day get their gift. I didn't have much choice. I didn't want to keep it. Emily could take the leading role in my rom-com, and I am used to being the support character anyways. I handed it on the way to work on the following morning. The policeman looked a little weirded out, but he accepted it as a lost and found item. I went home later that night. So yeah, I worked on Christmas Day, and it's not that uncommon here. Anyway, I went home and I checked the mail, just as I always do. And I found a brown envelope in my post box. It was unstamped, so that meant that it must have been hand-delivered. Interesting. I opened the letter, and there was a note. There were only a couple of words written angrily on a piece of standard paper. It was in stark contrast to the present that I opened on Christmas Eve. Actually, maybe I shouldn't have opened it a day earlier. Anyways, the short message in the envelope read, "Give it back." I was weirded out by that. It seemed pretty aggressive. I thought about the situation and I decided to put a note up on my mailbox to put an end to whatever was going on. This misidentification of me for Emily and the anger that appeared to be in that second letter I received. So I wrote, "Hey, I'm so sorry, but I accidentally opened the present you wanted to give to Emily. I handed your present in at a police station." I went to see if I had a response in the morning, and I saw that the note that I pinned to the mailbox had been angrily torn off. Something about that was a little jarring. The guy went from ultra nice guy to angry and demanding. It just made me think. So, Emily, wherever you are, I hope you stay safe. I went Christmas shopping last year, and the mall I go to offers a gift wrapping service. Basically, you hand over your gifts and are given a ticket, and then you give them a bit of time to wrap them, and then you can come back later and exchange your ticket for your wrapped gift. It's kind of like taking a ticket at the deli or a lottery number. You need to make sure you hang on to that ticket to get the presents back. I am sure you are familiar with what I'm trying to say. So while I was in line to collect my presents, I had my ticket in my hand and I was scrolling through something, or I was on my phone and I wasn't paying attention. Suddenly, I felt a tug to my hand and I felt something brush past me. I looked and I saw that my ticket had been stolen. Nothing like that had ever happened to me before, and I screamed and I started to cry. I'm a bit dramatic, just to let you know. I felt terrible, and I felt so sorry for myself because I am a mother with 2 Christmas-loving elementary school children, and I was absolutely devastated. I saw a child running off with my ticket, and I was shocked to hear him celebrating and shouting to his mother. "I got it! I got it!" I couldn't do much as they both turned and ran. I stood there totally dejected, thinking about the look that I had seen on that boy's mother's face. She didn't reprimand the boy. She didn't stop him. I guess she was used to it. Thankfully, one of the clerks at the mall saw the whole thing, and the number on the ticket wasn't that difficult to remember either. I still remember it. It was 2527. And of course, when they ran it through their system, they found my name against the number. I even had the receipts of all my purchases to back up my claim, so I was really lucky. I can imagine others in my position who could have been worse off, and I find that so terrible to think of at Christmas time. In the end, there wasn't an issue for me. I don't know if the parent and child returned later to attempt to claim the gifts. I had some time to think about it, and I think that the child couldn't get what he wanted unless he stole it. Maybe he was encouraged to steal what he wanted by his mom. If that's the case, then that's really sad, but it's an event that makes me more sad than angry. This happened when I was a little kid. I grew up poor. We never had much. My family and I lived in a really cheap dump of an apartment on a bad side of town. I never got any of the toys and cool things that all the other kids at school got, except for Christmas. Each year on Christmas morning, there was always a present waiting there for me. The presents were things like stationery for school or some cheap toys. I was never ungrateful. I eagerly awaited Christmas morning and Santa's gifts each year. I believed in Santa at that age, so I didn't ever thank my parents for the presents. I kept my presents in the best possible condition that I could, placing my treasures from Father Christmas as gently as I could in my drawers each night. My father was a heavy drinker. Each day he stank of alcohol. He would always get all angry and shout when he was drunk. My mother hated him. She seemed disgusted by him, and all she would do was wallow in her own self-pity. I never would have thought that either of them would give me a Christmas present. I wondered if they knew that I existed sometimes. It wasn't until I was in the 6th year of elementary school that I learned about Santa's true identity. I was so appreciative that my parents found the money each year for a gift for me. It really touched me. Going forward, I wanted to make sure that I thanked them each year. So, when Christmas Eve came around that year, I was lying in bed, wondering what I might be getting that year and how I was going to thank my parents for it. I was so excited that I couldn't sleep. But eventually, I did fall asleep because later, I was awoken by a sound. There was this strange scratching, scuttling kind of noise coming from beside my bed. I knew exactly what that sound was. It was someone leaving a present for me. Then it sounded as if something had just been placed down on the ground. I kept on pretending to be asleep, but I slightly opened my eyes and there was a black shadow next to my bed. I almost screamed the house down. I kept looking at the shadow and quickly realized that it wasn't my mom or dad. It didn't even look human. It was very thin, which vaguely resembled the shape of a human. Its eyes were darting around the room like it was glitching out. I couldn't see a mouth or a nose or hair, and I kept staring at it, and for a split second, it looked like my father. But I knew that that thing clearly wasn't him though. It was horrifying. I don't know if I was overcome with fear or if I simply fell back asleep, but that was the last thing that I can remember. And the next time that I opened my eyes, the sun was rising. The present was still there at my bedside. I guess that perhaps I had just had a bad dream, and I shoved those dreams aside and I sat up in bed. And since it was Christmas, I opened my present. I had been waiting all year for this day, and I couldn't believe my eyes that in that box was the latest game console. All the kids were talking about it at school, and only a few students in my class had one. I don't know why, but I just burst out crying. I was so happy, and yet I was more grateful than happy. I was overwhelmed. It was the greatest morning ever. I ran into the kitchen to ask about my present. I asked her if Dad had given me the present. She asked that my father went out drinking and didn't come home last night. Therefore, it wasn't him. I guessed it wasn't from her, since she seemed to know nothing about it. I decided not to say anything about the present. She saw me playing on games console, but never asked where I got it. It's like she didn't know if I had one before or not. Dad didn't come home. In fact, he never came home. He passed away. We aren't sure when it was, but essentially, he drank himself to death. When I got older, I married my beautiful wife and I have a child of my own. I always wondered where that expensive gift came from. In my heart, I always knew that it was from my dad. I think all of my presents were from him. I have thought about it for many years, and I think that he was apologizing for being a terrible dad each year by giving me a present. I like to think that the last one was his parting gift. My son turned 4, and I decided to tell my wife about my theory, and she strongly disagreed with me. She didn't tell me why though. She just said that it was impossible. That was a little sad. Even as an adult, I cherished the idea of him trying to be a good father for just one day out of the year. We gave presents each year to my son, but I didn't want to leave the presents for him by the side of his bed. I told my wife not to do it either. It just didn't feel right to me. One year on Christmas Day, he came rushing into our bedroom in the early hours of the morning, brandishing a gift in his hand, and when we asked him where he had got it, he said that he had found it next to his bed. I was completely overwhelmed. In the box were some cheap toys and some stationery, just like I had when I was his age. It's like he came back to give his grandson a present. Dad, if it was you... No, I know that it was you. So, Thank you. When I was 4 years old, I saw Santa Claus. I woke up in the dead of night and I rolled over in bed and happened to glance towards the window. I saw an old man in my room with a big sack in his hand. He was about to leave through the window, which was surprising since my bedroom was on the second floor. "It's Santa!" I roared inside my mind. For some reason, the words wouldn't come out. Maybe I was too nervous, and I didn't want to scare him. I felt very sleepy and drowsy, and I fell back asleep. The next morning when I woke up, there was a present waiting for me under the tree. Of course, it was from my parents, but I had no idea. I thought that Santa had brought it. I believed in Santa until I was in high school because I had actually seen him with my own eyes. I couldn't understand why some kids were saying that he wasn't real. I am much older now, and it was only a few days ago that I remembered the event that happened, and I brought it up to my parents. I wanted to ask them if it was one of them that dressed up. My mom was obviously shocked by my story, and her response was, "Back then, when you were 4, a lot of very strange things were happening at home. Things from our house went missing, food, possessions, and other things. We found a dirty footprint in your bedroom too, from a boot, which no one in the house owned. You didn't see Santa Claus. I'm really glad that you didn't call out to whoever was in the room with you." And come to think of it, the sack he was carrying probably wasn't a sack, but a bag. I remember that it was white, and now I know that that's not the usual color of Santa's sack. It looked dirty. He looked dirty. And I most likely saw a burglar in my room. It was another lonely Christmas. I feel like I'm always alone this time of year. I don't have a girlfriend, and I don't really have any friends who live close by. Since it was Christmas, I thought, why not go out and get a drink? I didn't really want to sit in a bar alone by myself, so I decided to drive to a specialty liquor store to get myself a couple of bottles of something special. It took a while to get there, and since it was winter, it got dark out pretty quickly. I was out on the dark roads alone, and I didn't see any other cars. People had plans for the holidays, I guess. I took the mountain roads on the way back from the store. I thought, why not? I had plenty of time. I thought that it would be pretty nice to take in the views on the quiet roads. I thought that I might even have a chance to see some wildlife. I knew that deer and wild boars live in these mountains. I pulled over and then I took a break. I sat in my car with my heating on thinking about life and wishing. I got out of the car after a while because I wanted to see if I could see the stars. I was walking around a little and I found a little rocky outcrop to sit on. I sat there for a while and then a piece of paper carried by the wind landed at my feet. This wasn't uncommon. Often in the mountains, you find scraps of paper, trash, and pieces of clothing sometimes too. For some reason that night though, I bent over and I picked up the piece of paper. I don't know why, maybe because it was Christmas and I was bored. There was something written on the paper and it read, "Hey, are you free tonight?" Some message written by some kid, probably passed to someone they liked in a classroom somewhere. You know, like a love letter or something. Well, that's what I thought it was anyway. I read it again, smiled to myself, and said out loud, "Well, I am alone at Christmas, so yeah." That was a mistake on my part. You'll find out why shortly. I heard before that if you ditch your garbage out in the mountains, something out there can make use of it. The rules are different out there in the wilderness. After a smoke, I decided to head out. I felt a little reluctant to leave somehow. I sat there in the car and I went to start the ignition, but it didn't start. I was talking to myself again and I was saying stuff like, come on, give me a break. I kept trying the ignition, but it wouldn't start. No matter what I did, I couldn't get my goddamn car to start on Christmas. I was looking at the prospect of spending the night on the mountain pass, or at least waiting for a car to pass by so that I could flag it down. But no cars passed. Of course, no one would be dumb enough to be driving out in the mountain roads on Christmas night. I got out of the car to have another smoke, completely dejected, and that was when a thought occurred to me. The piece of paper carried by the winds arrived at the forefront of my mind. I said aloud without much thought, "Actually, I'm not free tonight." I guess I kind of muttered it. I tried my ignition, and my car started instantly. Back in business, finally. I paused for a second and I said, "Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I gotta go." And then I headed off. It just felt right to say that. I left with the feeling that I was in some sort of an argument with something that I couldn't see. Anyways, I drove for about an hour. Yeah, the liquor store was that far away. And then when I arrived at some kind of tourist area, my car spluttered to a stop. This was just what I needed. I thought that I would pull over and take a drink and smoke and try to figure out my next plan of action. I stood by a vending machine and I was grateful for the light in the dark shadow of the mountains. I put some change in the machine and I picked out my drink, but it wouldn't come out. Then, as if to laugh at my plight, the wind picked up and carried this howling sound all around me. I didn't like the situation I was in, so I knocked on a nearby door, and I stood there for a while in front of a house, but no one came to the door. I started to get a little worried about how I was going to get home. I went back to my car, and I grabbed one of the bottles of booze that I bought at the store, and I had a drink. I went back to the vending machine to see if I could use its light to read a map that I had. I said aloud for some reason after a couple of swigs of my booze, "You should drink too." I went back to the car and I started the engine. I know that was really bad of me, and I don't make a habit of anything like that, but I thought that my car had broken down and that was why I drank. But when I started the engine again, my car started perfectly fine again. I was really happy but a little perplexed. Anyway, I drove home without any more troubles, car or otherwise. I drank again when I was at home. I carried on with a bottle that I cracked by the side of the road. And once I drained that bad boy, I went back out to the car to get the other one. But it was missing. I was then reminded of the words that I said out loud there. I had a conversation with something out there, and I am not sure that that note started all of it. Hey, I can't be that mad, right? Christmas is about spending time with someone, right? At least, I wasn't lonely that night. I was a little scared though, and it was just a weird experience. Every Christmas, my family has a tradition of coming together for a big celebration. It's something that we've done for as long as I can remember, a chance to reconnect with relatives that we rarely see throughout the year. Our family is pretty large, with branches spreading out across states and even a few internationally. Because of this, I've grown up knowing that there will always be someone new at the Christmas table, often a distant cousin or an in-law that I haven't met before. Our family gatherings are chaotic but heartwarming. always filled with laughter, stories, and the comforting smell of holiday food. The adults catch up over eggnog while the kids run around, excitedly waiting for the presents under the tree. It's a tradition that brings warmth to the cold winter days, a reminder of connection and belonging. This year was no different, with my parents' house bustling with activity as relatives arrived. I recognized most of the faces, but there were always a few that took me a moment to place. That's the nature of big families. You don't know everyone well, which sometimes makes it hard to keep track of who's who. As the party got into full swing, a man arrived who I didn't recognize. He was introduced by another relative as being on the extended side of the family, maybe a cousin from a branch that I hadn't interacted with much. He was tall, with a scruffy beard and a wide grin that seemed a little forced. He said his name was James, and though his presence was unassuming at first, something about him seemed slightly off. Throughout the evening, I tried to engage with him, but he seemed distracted, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for something or someone. He'd stand alone in corners, occasionally mumbling to himself and glancing around with a nervous energy that didn't match the festive atmosphere. It was odd, but I shrugged it off. After all, big family gatherings can be overwhelming, especially if you're not familiar with everyone. As dinner progressed, James became increasingly erratic. He joined conversations briefly, only to interrupt with strange comments about conspiracies or government surveillance. Most people just laughed it off or didn't pay much attention, attributing his behavior to perhaps a bit too much holiday cheer or drinks. And after dinner, as we all moved into the living room to exchange gifts, James lingered in the dining room, seemingly entranced by something. Whatever that something was, I didn't know. I just noticed him pacing back and forth, his movements jittery. He kept glancing at the large window, muttering softly under his breath. It was unsettling to say the least, but I swept it up in excitement of gift-giving and pushed the thought aside. The evening took a more sinister turn when we heard a loud crash from the kitchen. We all rushed in to find James, standing among a scatter of broken plates, eyes wild as he began shouting about Santa coming to get us. His voice was a mix of fear and anger, insisting that the jolly figure that we knew was actually a harbinger of doom. It was bizarre, his words a jumble of nonsense that made everyone freeze in shock. My uncles quickly moved to calm him down, guiding him out of the kitchen and then towards the door. His protests were loud, filled with warnings of impending danger that didn't make any sense to us. And despite the chaos, they managed to get him outside, closing and locking the door on his strange ranting. We could hear him yelling outside, but after a couple of minutes, he probably left and was gone. The atmosphere inside was tense and we were confused, but the good thing is that slowly, the mood began to return to normal, with everyone trying to laugh off the incident. As it was getting late, family members started to leave. We pieced together what happened. It dawned on us that no one could quite place who exactly James was. My parents checked with every branch of the family, but no one claimed him as a relative. The realization hit hard. Had we really just let a complete stranger into our home, assuming he was family because his behavior was slightly odd, but not unheard of at such gatherings? The thought was chilling. We had been so open, so trusting, assuming the best because that's what family does during the holidays. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I considered the potential danger in our mistake. We had all been so caught up in the spirit of the season, wanting to welcome everyone, that we had overlooked the possibility of someone taking advantage of that goodwill. As I prepared for bed, I couldn't shake the image of James' wild eyes, the frantic way he spoke of danger. Though we laughed it off in the moment, it was a lesson learned, one that would make us more mindful in future gatherings. The holiday season is a time for love and connection, but it also is a time to be vigilant, ensuring that the warmth of our traditions does not blind us to the realities of the world outside. A few years ago, I decided to have a Christmas party with my friends. It was being held at a male friend's apartment. There were about 5 or 6 of us in total, and it was a mix of both genders. We planned on cooking together, and we were going to have shabu-shabu. For those who don't know, shabu-shabu is a Japanese hot pot dish. It mainly consists of thinly sliced meat and vegetables cooked in boiling stock water and served with various dipping sauces, some spicy, salty, and etc. It's really nice. It's ideal for cold nights. We had fun making dinner and of course eating it. We drank alcohol and ended the meal with some cake that the host had prepared for the party. The hour was growing late by the time that we had finished eating, and the vibes were still going strong though. And after a little while, we started to slow down. I think all that food and booze caught up with us. So perhaps with the intention to get the party back into the swing of things, one of my friends suggested that we tell ghost stories. I can't remember how it came about, but I think that telling ghost stories at Christmas is a Western tradition or something, so we wanted to give it a shot. But the host of the party was a guy, and he kinda subtly suggested that we could do something else instead. However, one of the girls who was getting very excited at the idea of hearing ghost stories persisted. The host then interrupted her as she began her story by saying, "Please, can you not? Please don't tell ghost stories here." I just thought to myself, whoa, he doesn't like scary stuff then, hey? The girl who wanted to tell the story so badly replied with, "Oh, don't worry, it's not scary, it's just kind of funny." And then she went back to tell her story. As soon as she started telling her story, a large plastic bottle on the kitchen table at the other side of the room cracked. You know what I mean, right? It was like it was dented or someone hit it. It then tumbled to the floor. No one touched it. No one was even near it. It was the strangest thing. We all shut up instantly when we heard that, and then the host said, "See? That's why I didn't want you to tell ghost stories here." He said it so nonchalantly, he was unfazed. "Sorry, I should have maybe mentioned this to you before, but I didn't think that we had any plans to get spooky tonight. This is an accident property, a home with a history." "What do you mean?" someone asked. "Well, they say that this place is haunted, and I am inclined to believe that. Here, look at this," he said as he pushed his wardrobe to the side to reveal some flooring panels that didn't match the others. I don't know what he was hinting at, but perhaps something had happened in that spot. So now we were all ears. We wanted to know more about what it was like living in a haunted property. "Usually the spirit doesn't bother me, but if I watch a horror movie or anything spooky, that's when things go wrong. This is how I found out what I needed to avoid. I once left a show on about a psychic medium attempting to speak to ghosts last summer. And after a couple of minutes, my hair started to smell as if it was burning." He was saying it all so matter-of-factly. I think this place is probably haunted by the spirit of a woman. I think she gets jealous when I am looking at other ghosts. But you know what? She's never hurt anyone, and I have had dates come back with me and be totally fine. It's really the strangest thing, you know? I really didn't know what to say. I mean, was this guy joking or being serious? I started to feel as if something was off about the dude, and the silence that fell upon the room told me that the others were probably feeling the same. During the night's drinking and partying, we had all decided to stay at his place, and there was no going back now that it was late. We were stuck there until morning came. The question was, were we stuck with a madman or an actual ghost? Some of the girls were really freaked out and insisted that we watch comedy movies and clips on YouTube until the sun came up. All of us at one point or another must have been telling ourselves, "Don't think about anything scary. Don't think about anything scary. Don't think about anything scary. Or else something might happen." Well, it was an unforgettable Christmas, all right? This one is an urban legend. You know, the kind you hear from a friend of a friend, that you can never really be sure if the source is lying or telling the truth. But could it be real? Well, I will leave that decision to you. This is the story of a family, perhaps not too dissimilar to your own. The father of the household has just been out Christmas shopping. He was supposed to return home with a trunk full of presents for his family and then sit down grinning to his wife while they all enjoyed a Christmas Eve dinner together, and the children eagerly awaiting the 25th. Unfortunately, Dad didn't come home that night. His chair was empty at the dinner table, and his wife tried as gently as she could to explain his absence to his confused children, all the while being nervous herself. The children didn't get their presents that year, and they were terribly sad that the father wasn't there to enjoy Christmas with them. Christmas Day passed, and then Boxing Day did too, but Dad still wasn't back. Mom was just as worried as the young ones. Reports were filed, policemen arrived and furrowed their brows, yet no conclusions were ever reached. Nothing changed in his absence, save for a new smell in the family home. Mother called for a cleaner. She asked for every inch of the house to be cleaned. The days passed, but the odor didn't. The cleaners approached the fireplace and found something in the chimney, which they thought to be a blockage. They poked and prodded at the blockage, and then they heard something begin to tumble down the chimney. Presents fell all about them, tattered and dusty, and the wrapping paper revealed glimpses of the contents. But then, something began to slump down the chimney behind them. Well, it was the body of the missing father. He had climbed upon the roof with the intent to come down the chimney, just like Father Christmas, to please the children. His neck was broken, and he met his end there in the claustrophobic chimney. And here's the riddle for this video. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate it. I would also like to give some extra love to my Patreon members, my channel members, and also my tippers. Thank you so much. If you would like to extend a little bit more support for the channel, don't forget to leave a like and a comment down below. If you would like to become a Patreon member, a channel member, a tipper, or even to buy merch, check out the links in the description below. Again, thank you. And I hope you stay scared, because your fear feeds me.